So I'm speaking today with Sue Kirk, otherwise known as Captain Kirk, on the issue of Bartitsu.
Brilliant.
Cool. So I met Sue many years ago. I don't know how many manys, but a number of many years ago. And I think I might have incidentally met Sue before either of us knew that I met Sue. At some degree of stabby, punchy, throwy thing. Probably a fight camp at some point. But so if you could talk us through a little bit about some of the areas that you study, Bartitsu, pugilism, what kind of areas do you look after or look into?
Oh, fantastic. I suppose it's really weird because I've been doing HEMA for 20 years. And in that, you get exposed to quite a lot of different things. And I came across Bartitsu quite early on through Mark Donnelly, who now does a lot of Bartitsu demonstrations and workshops in the States. He was my initial HEMA instructor in Leeds with the Society for the Study of Swordsmanship. And then after that, I was part of the gang that regularly went to the Noble Science and got exposed to lots and lots of different unarmed activities for HEMA, and that's where I also met James Marwood, which I think is another sort of character on the scene. But my interest in Bartitsu was really sparked through those experiences, and I loved the fact that you could do lots of different things that were brought together in one space. And I started looking at lots of the original sources that you could find, and picking up on the context of how Bartitsu sits in its era and what happened around that. And so my interest there sparked other things that I went off and did around Bartitsu. Not just looking at cane fighting particularly, which I love, umbrellas and walking sticks and that sort of thing. It sparked a real interest in pugilism. So now I also get invited to go and instruct in not just Bartitsu as a general thing, but in pugilism particularly, and wrestling as part of that. And I spent a few years recently in London, and I took the opportunity to go and study Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu whilst I was there as well, which tied over with the other wrestling stuff. And so I got an angle on the Jiu-Jitsu elements that were coming in through the Bartitsu as well. I just loved the package that it pulled together, and just really wanted to get to grips with it all and understand how it worked together.
Cool. And what do you think makes it kind of unique or special? There's lots of arts that do similar things: punching, kicking, throwing weapons. What about Bartitsu and things like Bartitsu make it special?
So I think there's something around, as I said, around its context, the history, the zeitgeist. It really kicked into the physical culture lift off in the late Victorian era, but combined with that understanding or fear, I suppose, of footpads and people, assaulting you, going home from your club and things, at a time where people didn't feel that they had adequate protection from the police or, self-defense, things like swords that they would have had in previous eras. And that context piece, I just felt was crying out for somebody like Barton Wright to bring back and pull everything together. And he was a real showman in that space, managing to encapsulate that zeitgeist in a way that people really wanted to learn it. So he hit that moment in time where lots of people were going, we need something, we're interested, this is new, this is interesting, let's have a go. And he also captured the fact that he said anybody could do it. This wasn't the elitist individuals in a posh club somewhere, really, although he had that as well. This was out in the newspapers saying, right, well, you can do stuff with a walking stick or whatever you had to hand, or a bicycle, that defence was there, and women could do it too. That really draws a lot of it together for me. I think one of the specialisms as well is he was able to combine some of the standard things that people knew about in the country at the time. Yeah. So stick fighting, you would see that on the village green. Wrestling, pugilism, you'd see all of that happen, even shin kicking, the purring, he was able to like pull that all together. And bring some more sort of European things like the savate and the can into the mix as well. But I think what added that icing on the cake was him being one of the first to bring back the Eastern martial art element and go, this is different, this is new stuff, and we can combine it with everything else that we're doing to create something a bit different and a bit spectacular. And I think it was quite showy as well, the way that he put it out to people. But at the heart of it, for me, as a martial artist, there's an element there that takes it away from one specialism and takes it back to principles. So distance. What can you do when this scenario happens at this particular distance? And you can draw on techniques that you can quickly understand and then apply for various scenarios. So if you're at the furthest distance, it's throw stuff, hit stuff with sticks. If you're closer in, it's kick. If it's closer in, it's punch. If it's the closest in and your core, then you're into your jiu-jitsu. And you could see those stages. And somebody who's not used to a martial arts background necessarily could pick up some key techniques to understand that. So that's one of the elements. One of the other sides of it that gets me is, from a martial artist perspective, is also the whole of the techniques flow together, because it's all about levers and body mechanics. And that is a real passion of mine, of things that I do with the pugilism and the wrestling, but even small sword, which is one of the other things that I teach a lot of. Movement, timing, mechanics of the body mechanics and how you move really have an impact on and a use within Bartitsu. So if you understand levers, you can use a stick, you can defend yourself. If you understand body mechanics and how weight shifts and moves, you can put somebody in a position really quickly that they're not expecting, and that art of surprise brings it all out as part of that.
And do you think it's still got value as a self-defense art? Do you think it's still useful for people to know?
So that's $1,000 question in some ways, because a lot of what I've read about it's of its era, and it sits in that context. But when you look at those fundamental principles, the body mechanics, the levers, they flow through right from Fiore doing long sword and throwing people, all the way through to other stuff that I cover, the suffragitsu, the World War II combatives, and even to modern day techniques. You're still using them, so there is a place for it, and I think the use of implements that you can pick up and easily handle, that aren't exactly a defined weapon. You can use anything to help defend, and I think Bartitsu encapsulates some of that in what you can do. In fact, when I was working in Whitehall when the terrorist attacks were all happening, and there's some things that were happening right outside my building that I was in there, my boss used to say to me, right, well, I'm hiding behind you if we go out and we're going for a meeting somewhere and anything kicks off. And so I actually took to thinking, right, well, I can use my laptop, I can use my brolly, even a fold down one. Right, what have I got around me? And those principles, I was sort of thinking, well, actually, they have a today vibe about it. And wandering up and down at Whitehall, getting to meetings, that was bringing it right bang up to date for me in the fact that I felt I had at least some techniques that I could utilise if the proverbial hit the fan, and something was kicking off and I was there in work clothing and, sort of running down in a pair of heels, what the heels can be a weapon, whatever you could utilise would be on hand. So there you go. It does have a modern application too, but I wouldn't go out and necessarily train it to people as such. That's what I That's very
I mean,
fun.
that bloke picked up a narwhal horn, so if you can fight with a narwhal horn, then you're
And a
set for.
fire extinguisher,
Yeah,
and but I mean that's the most recent set. But prior to that, people were utilising chairs.
yeah.
They were, throwing beer at them. Well, although that's a bit of a waste, I suppose, as well. But you just utilise what you have to hand. But if you don't understand some of those principles of how to use an improvised implement, then you're a little bit stuck, and you'll be slower in your responses, or you won't see that opportunity in quite the same way.
What do you think will make Bartitsu and unarmed HEMA grow? It's grown exponentially. I mean, you and a lot of other people were kind of intrinsic to it growing in the first place. What do you think will make it grow now? Where can it go from here?
In lots of places. I mean, you've got competition from defined self-defense systems like Krav Maga, but you've also got opportunities to get some of it out there that's not necessarily linked to LARPing, steampunk. Those are definite opportunities because you've got the link to that era, that vibe, the use of it in films, the use of it in Sherlock Holmes and the like. But I think it's just getting the message out there. And one of the things that I have tried to do, probably this is over the last 7 or 8 years now, I used to do a lot of event management for places, sort of large-scale historical reenactment stuff. I was a reenactor, many moons ago as well, and ended up getting invited to organise stuff. And English Heritage used to run massive events, a couple of times a year, and I'd go off and do things. I spotted an opportunity that I wanted to exploit, and that was actually getting the message out for a hidden bit of history. Because Bartitsu wasn't really known, or still isn't really known to many people. And I took the opportunity to suggest, I got a slot at a massive event to put together a small team of people and do some demonstrations of Bartitsu in costume, which set it in its context, and you could talk about why it was created and who did it. But my selling point on it was that we wouldn't be stage fighting necessarily. It was proper techniques that I wanted to show as part of it. So I was able to pull together a demonstration that had others involved. I could show some of the techniques and show some of the principles to people, and they'd walk away going, hang on a second, this is quite interesting. And out of that, we actually gained a few individuals that probably got involved in either HEMA or Bartitsu or did some more research themselves about the whole topic. So it's like expanding that knowledge set. And actually, I thought it would be a couple of events and it'd be done. But 8 years later, we're still, as a group, getting invited to lots of different places to do demonstrations like that. We've linked it through to Edith Garrett and the suffragitsu movement more recently, because that made a lot more. It linked to anniversaries of experience of that. But I felt that was one way that I could get it out there. The other way that I could get it out there and advertise it was across the HEMA world a bit more. So I get invited to a lot of events through the year. I'm quite, as I said, I've done HEMA for 20 years. I've been an instructor for about 13 years in various things. I used to be the president of the closest we've got to a UK national body for HEMA. And I was able to utilise some of that forum and some of the opportunities of being an instructor to get out to events. And one of the things that I was offering was Bartitsu. And so it got picked up because you can do a class in Bartitsu in 90 minutes to get a taster session for people. And from that, they can go away and start doing studying in more detail. And from that, they go and attend things like the Noble Science or Bartitsu Lab days that you've run, and it starts to build its own momentum as well.
And in terms of, a lot of people might know you for fencing, small sword fencing. How important is knowledge of fencing for Bartitsu? Is there good kind of correlation between the two? Do they help each other?
Well, I'm hoping that I converted you as a pugilist into small sword, because I said to you there was a tie over between the two, and it's all about aiming on. So small sword is a direct hit, so it's like a punch that you're utilising, and it's all about deflection. So if you link it to pugilism, some of the movements and keeping your footwork tidy. If you're looking at distance, you're quite close in, your speed that you have to do, and that understanding of being able to respond to an action coming at you, they all tie together. And small sword in particular, because it's a point-oriented weapon, feels very punchy to me. Yeah. And hopefully I've converted you to small sword alongside that.
I've just got to find a nearby club. There's lots of fencing clubs, but that's all too tame for me.
You just need to invite me to a session.
Exactly. When the world stops ending and the zombie apocalypse finishes.
No, we want the zombie apocalypse because we can go out and do stuff then rather than sit at home.
It has been a terribly disappointing zombie apocalypse for everybody.
Yeah.
Don't get to live in a castle, nothing.
No, you're there in your pyjamas.
What do you think are some of the things that could hold back unarmed HEMA? What are the things that kind of stop it spreading? What should people avoid?
Okay, so I think there's a couple of things that I'd point out. Unarmed is not for everybody. And so when people, if they're looking at HEMA, they think swords first. Yeah. And usually longsword is a big beefy, bit of kit to swing around. Yeah. And with tournaments and the like, that's a real passion for a lot of people. I think the unarmed is the probably nerdy end of the spectrum of HEMA, or a niche within that. Because a lot of people aren't used to being so up close and personal. Yeah. And you have to be when you're looking at the jiu-jitsu end of the spectrum and the wrestling and the pugilism. You are going to get hurt. You are going to get into locks that might be uncomfortable. But I would say that alongside of that, anybody that does the unarmed spectrum of any martial art, actually you're a bit of a special breed as well, in the fact that you are probably wanting to work together to further each other's skill set, and you're more likely to go, no, you've not quite got it, that hurts now, okay, do that again. And it's that working together and that feeling of camaraderie that you quite often get in the unarmed world, because you know each other a lot and you work together, and you have to make sure that you're working with your partner, otherwise you can actually hurt each other quite a lot more quickly. So that's one end. I think it will only ever be interesting to a smaller number of individuals anyway, because it's evil, mean and lovely. I like it. Catch wrestling and all the rest of it. It's good fun. It hurts. It's great. But I think the other side of it is not getting too gimmicky, because there is that hangover with Bartitsu that could mean that it ends up just being the steampunk, the LARPers, because it's I can play with a cane and an umbrella and that's it, and it links through to just film stuff. Because although that's our shop front to a lot of the action activities, it also can hold us back and just be seen as another thing that's in the costumed end of the spectrum. Yeah. And you could argue that I'm part of that evil thing because I've gone out and done costumed demonstrations of it. But I was trying to weigh up the context and the getting the message out there alongside that.
I do it all the time, and I put myself firmly in the fighty end of most things, and I still put on my tweed and have a play. It's good.
There you go. So that's an up, but it's also a downside of doing it, because you might not then get seen as current. You might not then get seen as the martial end of the art to do it. I mean, Krav Maga has quite a kind of butch kind of vibe to it, and has its own culture, and I think Bartitsu hasn't quite found its end niche culture for what it needs to be going forward.
I mean, it's a lot of grown men pretending to be action man, though, isn't it, if we're honest? A lot of men wearing too much army surplus and canvas, and a lot of make-believe accountants You can enter the West Bank and chop stuff. No,
Nothing.
I've got a lot of friends. I'm going to take a piss. That's going to happen. I'm a reverend for everybody. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, you personally, is there anything that you're working on? Right, obviously the zombie apocalypse happened, but is there anything you're working on, researching, you want to explore more, either now or once the world gets back to normal?
So I've done a lot over the last year over things like the pugilism side of things, because I wanted to get more into that. And as I've delved into it, the more that I found that it was quite standard for women to do as well.
Yeah.
And that's a forgotten piece for a lot of people. They don't understand, they don't realise the fact that there's women involved, and it was you go out and win your purse just like the blokes did, in a bare knuckle context. So I've been doing quite a lot of that, and that was prompted a little bit because the gang that I'm part of did a demonstration at Scarborough Castle last year on Victorian pugilism. And that prompted a heck of a lot of research into it, because I was trying to encapsulate some of the vibe behind it, the reasons why you might be out there doing demonstrations of pugilism, but also those techniques and the stories behind it as well. Why do pugilists not really have long hair? Well, that's because Mendoza got blathered as part of his because he got grabbed by his hair in a fight, and that sort of thing. And the first heavyweight fighter, there was a lady that won a heavyweight pugilism title.
I remember reading a story about female pugilists that one of the more niche competitions was to hold a shilling or a tuppence, some kind of coin in your fists. And obviously, if you let go, then you lose. I'm assuming that you win all the money after if they drop them. I don't know, but that was quite an interesting one.
Yeah. So that's one of the areas, and I suppose in conjunction with Jennifer Garside and that doing the suffragitsu end, the Edith Garrett story has come through, and done a lot of research around that takes it further. I suppose, yeah. So pugilism is probably one of the key bits. Cane fighting, love it. I just love it. The levers, the stuff that you can do. But taking it out of just that's in the canonical Bartitsu manual, and going into different manuals that look at cane fighting and the hook stick versus the straight stick. There's some stuff in that I think I'd like to sort of delve even further, because there's some mean things in that as well.
Basically, you flick through the manuals, don't you? Find
things that you go,
give it. That's what I do anyway. Take me to the mean stuff, get past the boring stuff. And in terms of, one of the things that's very hard to miss for people looking at Bartitsu from the outside in is, unlike other bits of unarmed HEMA, it's very popular with women. So, I'd say that the gender balance in something like Bartitsu is probably a lot better than historical pugilism or historical wrestling. So what do you think some of the reasons are why women tend to enjoy Bartitsu? Is it the suffragitsu link, or?
I think there is. I think there's an element of that. But I think when we started doing a lot of Bartitsu kind of 8 years ago, you had a core of women that were happy to go off and do it and instruct in it as well. So partly it wasn't seen as just a male preserve doing it. Secondly, it's in the books that you've got women doing Bartitsu. And they're recommended to do Bartitsu. Thirdly, you've got the suffragitsu angle, where it sort of heads off into that world, and the Edith Garrett link with her husband watching the demonstrations that Barton Wright was putting on, and from that learning to be jiu-jitsu instructors themselves, and going off and Edith teaching the bodyguard of the WSPU. So you have elements there. But I think, fundamentally, you had a core of women that were there at the start, who were interested in it, who could see a practical application of it in their everyday life as well. So it's not a sort of macho tournament. This is self-defense. This is sort of fending off an attacker, and that is something that a lot of women, even in this day and age, are cautious about,
Yeah.
and wanting to make sure that they could defend themselves if they needed to.
One of the things I quite like about Pierre Vigny was that he used to take his wife to pubs and pay men to fight his wife, which I think is beautifully ahead of his time.
Go on, fight it. Yep. Would you?
Which is brilliant. I love that kind of relationship dynamic that they have. I think that's fantastic.
What I do like over being, I'm probably unusual even in amongst the instructors in HEMA world, in the fact that I've been around for quite a long time, and I do such a broad range of different things. The World War II combatives, Bartitsu, the teaching Indian clubs even, and that kind of thing. But for me, the whole package comes together with that. The body mechanics, the distance, the principles, the timing about it. And I just love doing that unarmed stuff, because I find it fascinating. And I've tried to get it out there for women as well. So there's a big event in the UK called By the Sword, and for a couple of years now I did the first one and then the third one that they ran. I did sessions there where I looked at grappling, particularly the wrestling side, for women to have a go, and pugilism. So I had a class of 40 women doing pugilism, and I had a class of 30 women doing, sort of catch wrestling. And I had women coming up to me going, I didn't think I could do that. I didn't think I had the ability to shift somebody as a dead weight off the top of me, or, go and do, where can I learn this? Where can I do more? So part of that is like breaking down the boundaries as well, so that women can have a go at something that is quite often traditionally regarded as pretty macho.
I think I get tricked every year because I see By the Sword, I forget it's a women's only event. I'm like, oh, interested in that. That looks really cool. And then I'm like, shit.
Sorry, you can't
Sorry,
come.
not me.
You're not allowed.
But it always looks really cool. Always looks really cool. So one year they should definitely stream it or record it or something, because the lineup is good.
I'll suggest it to Fran, the organizer. So one of the organisers. It's a fantastic event, and I think through that it opens doors. And the people that I spoke to, the invites that I had to Dortmund in September teaching wrestling, unfortunately it's cancelled. They wanted me to do a couple of wrestling sessions there. That came because one of the people that's involved in that group had gone to By the Sword and attended my wrestling class. Yeah. And they saw the tie over and the need for a little bit of understanding of grappling in HEMA for a start, because you do go to grapple. But they wanted particularly a woman to come and instruct on something like that as well, to make it feel open as well. So.
So if watchers don't know, you are Captain Kirk, as a former army captain, and one of the bits that you do.
It's my official title, should I wish to use it.
And I believe that is Cap apostrophe N Kirk, not Captain Kirk, because she'd be captain.
No, it's CAPT if you're looking for the official abbreviation for the UK.
We're looking for the most piratical interpretation of
Captain Kirk, yeah.
We also allow El Capitan or El Capitano Kirk, but we'll go with Captain Kirk. But for many people, they don't know that you also cover a lot of Fairburn Sykes World War II combatives, which obviously in case has parallels to Bartitsu, in that he's got a bit of jiu-jitsu, bit of kung fu, bit of boxing, bit of everything smushed together. Can you talk us through a little bit about Fairburn Sykes method and how that relates to kind of a Bartitsu approach?
So there's an awful lot of similarities, because if you think about Bartitsu, it's the idea is to get out of dodge really quickly, and get away from the attacker. For Fairburn Sykes and Perigard with his arorology and various other ones that I've researched, including the German. There's a German combatives manual I found recently, call it gangster stuff. The principle there isn't that you're just doing a once and done and off you go. You're once and done and killed, preferably, so that you're permanently putting somebody out of your misery, or defending yourself. So it's the principles take it up a notch. exactly the same sort of things over throws, pushes, hits. You would see those in Bartitsu, but there's an even bigger need to get to the end point in World War II combatives. Lots of grabbing by the testicles. Lots of, that's a classic one. Teach, get tough, and it's like the start and end of most actions on that.
But I think there's lots to be said for people studying Bartitsu to look at the Fairburn Psych stuff, because a lot of the jiu-jitsu crossover is very clear, in terms of use of open hand strikes, edge of hand strikes. Yes. Lot to be said there. And,
but the trips and throws, you see them in Bartitsu. Lots of the release the hands, lots. You see those in the canonical Bartitsu stuff as well. But what you'll see also, and also use of chair, use of there's even a matchbox defence in Get Tough, which I think is kind of amusing. Not that I'd ever use it, but you can see that the same principles are coming out for defending, but you're just up a notch in what happens if you don't get it right, because it's a kill or be killed situation. And when I teach it to people, I say, this is what your grandfathers were doing necessarily, or maybe great grandfathers now for some of the people. And this was what they were being taught to actually defend themselves, or give them a sense of having a go to defend yourself. So it might not necessarily work, but it's better than doing nothing.
I love watching the videos of the old dears when they used to be in, say, SOE or something, and they'll be like, yes, and I chopped the Jerry in the throat, and by God, he died. I love the fact that they're so frank about how it worked and what they did. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You've got the 5'0" French-speaking radio operator that's chopping Nazis in the throat. Fantastic.
Yeah, and it was there for anybody. And again, World War II combatives, most of the treatises talk about, or the books talk about, women doing it as well as the men, or the SOE operatives. And there's actually there's a self-defence manual that was created off the back of Get Tough as well, that was recommending women go out and do it for their own self-defence at home.
So one last question: if you're watching this now and you quite like the look of Bartitsu and pugilism and wrestling, how would you advise people to get started? What should you do if you're interested in this? You've been lurking, you want to give it a go. What should you do?
Oh, that's quite a tough session, because we don't have an awful lot of clubs up and down the country that specifically cover Bartitsu. But I think, get in touch with bartitsu.org. They might be able to help with some of that. You can get resources off the net, and you can look at the principles, because the instructions and the images that you see are pretty clear, at least on the canonical stuff, and you can have a go at it. Just bear in mind you can hurt people if you're not used to falling or working with body mechanics in that way. Contact me. You can do that, and go and find an event that might be to doing it. So you might see Bartitsu crop up at HEMA events. So go and have a look at some of the HEMA sites in around the world. You might even see it at, as I said, LARP or steampunk events coming out as well. So you will get exposure to it. Go watch some films.
And what kind of stuff, if you can't access a HEMA event, what in kind of a modern day context do you think people should pick up with the clubs that are available in most towns or cities?
I mean, you could go and you could do the Krav Maga side of things, or take a self-defense class would be fantastic. What a life skill. You should be doing that sort of thing anyway. But if you want to have a go at some of the more martial end, go to a boxing gym, go to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or a Jiu-Jitsu session, or wrestling if there's anything close by, because that gets you that up close and personal element of it, and you'll start to understand some of the mechanics behind at least the up close and personal stuff. Cool.
Okay. Well, that's just done. If Sue does lots of stuff all around the country. It's all very well advertised. I don't know if you have a website for your HEMA stuff.
I don't, but you can find me on Facebook. I'm around.
She'll accept your friend request unless you look weird. But thank you very, very much. That's been really interesting. I can't wait to small sword duel you again soon.
It'd be great to see you again, Tommy. Yeah.
Good to see you. See you later. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.